This episode's made possible by Planful.
Hi, everybody. This is David Barnes, CFO of Trimble, and you are listening to the CFO Thought Leader Podcast.
This is episode 945.
The current macroeconomic environment and the change in how software companies are valued and what investors want to see. Instead of growth at all costs, they want that balance. Growth and operational efficiency, driving free cash flow and positive earnings, but still rewarding for growth, and they reward more for growth. But you needed to get to profitability, and that's the place where we're at today, and we'll continue to leverage that from here. Yeah, I do think IPO is the likely path, but it could be something else as well.
Hi, it's Jack. On today's show, we speak with Doug Lindroth, CFO of Tealium. Doug Lindroth is not likely to forget the day Google filed its S-1 registration statement in preparation for its IPO, simply because it was the same day his company filed its own S-1. Back in 2004, Lindroth was CFO of Memic, a semiconductor distributor, when its management team opted to file a registration statement with the SEC in anticipation of a midsummer IPO. However, by the summer's end, only one of the two tech companies would be public, and it wasn't Memic. Memic's management, citing concerns about the cyclical nature of its business, ultimately pulled its S-1. Nevertheless, the S-1 filing had already exposed Memic's financial information to the light of day, catching the eye of a number of the industry's largest players, including distributor Avnet, which would acquire Memic only 2 years later. You'll hear that story and much more on today's episode. We'll be back after this.
Hi, I'm Rowan Tonkin, Chief Marketing Officer at Planful, and we're a proud sponsor of CFO Thought Leader. At Planful, we're empowering teams just like yours to drive peak financial performance in every corner of your business. What sets Planful apart? We have purpose-built applications for every department, from FP&A to accounting, marketing to HR, all with built-in financial intelligence. This means we can get you up and running within weeks, and it requires minimal IT involvement. So you can rapidly and seamlessly engage everyone across the business in your key financial processes. Best of all, you can't outgrow us. We take the pain of growing away with an unmatched ability to scale with you. You have an endless runway with Planful. See why over 1,300 customers around the world choose Planful as their flexible, user-friendly, end-to-end financial performance management platform. Go to planful.com and see how you can make financial performance a team sport in your business.
Hello, we're speaking with Doug Lindroth, CFO of Tealium. Doug, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So, Doug, we're going to begin where we always do, which is to ask you to look back for us and share some of the experiences you feel prepared you for a CFO role. What would come to mind for you?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. One, since I've been in this business for a long time, over 33 years now, I'll have to go way back, but I think it's some insightful experiences that I've had. So I'll start with one. But it even takes me all the way back to high school, where my dad was giving me some advice about selecting colleges and classes. And my dad was an accountant and a CFO. So his advice was, if you go down the accounting road in college, you're going to have great experience in understanding financial statements in business, no matter what you do. So whether that's you stay in the finance side or you move into an operational role, just understanding financial statements and how to read numbers and understand how they all fit together was his guidance. So I followed his footsteps and went to San Diego State, got my degree in accounting, and went to work for, at the time, one of the big 8 accounting firms, KPMG, which now it's down to 4, as many of you all know. One of the things that really stands out from my career there was the advice I got from one of the KPMG partners, who was my mentor during my time there. And we're talking about whether or not you stay in public accounting and how long you stay. And he said, in his time, he's watched when people leave public accounting and the roles they take at companies, and where are they 2 or 3 years later versus those that stayed in public accounting longer and the roles they were able to get when they left that, after 5 or 6 years. So I listened to him. I followed that advice. I ended up staying for 7 years and got the opportunity to go work for one of my clients called Memic. I went in as their corporate controller. So I went in at, a fairly high level. And after a couple of years, I became the Americas CFO. And a few years after that, I became the global CFO. So that was kind of Yeah, sure. Memic was a semiconductor distributor. And so this was back in the 90s. I got there in 1997. And we were growing really fast because this is as the dot-com era was really starting to peak. And here's another career experience that I think is very important. In 2000, and it was actually Q4 of 2000, we did a leverage buyout with the backing of a private equity company from our German parent company. So we closed that in Q4. And then almost right after that, the dot-com crash started to hit throughout the industry. But since we were there, a leverage buyout company with pretty large amounts of debt from the LBO, we had to move quickly to make sure we weren't in breach of any of those covenants. So this took the entire leadership in the organization to say, we have to very quickly, smartly right-size the organization. And it was one of the most pressure-packed and intense periods, I think, in my entire career of how do we do this, both that's going to be right for the company, right for the employees that are staying, and how do we treat and are right to the employees that, unfortunately, we're going to have to let go. So it was challenging. It was hard. One of the lessons that the chairman from the PE company told us, make sure when you're looking at how deep you cut in this type of experience and market, make sure you're forecasting your business on what you know, not what you hope to know. And that was really, really good advice. What that enabled us to do was really make sure that the reduction in force we needed to do was only one time. We didn't want it to be death by 1,000 cuts and our employees worried about when is the next one coming. So it required great communication to the board, the bankers, the lenders, the managers that were involved in all the departments evaluating their teams, and then ultimately the employees, both on those that were staying and those that were departing.
The company was ultimately, is it Avnet? Who buys the company ultimately?
Yeah, so we in 2004 were pretty far down the road in our IPO, and we were at the printers, and we filed our first S1 the same day that Google filed their S1. Unfortunately for us, that was a difficult time frame. That was in the spring, of 2004. It was pretty difficult for tech. Google was the only tech company that ended up getting out that summer. But for us, because we're tied to the semiconductor market, which is very cyclical, the market wasn't right for us to go. So we withdrew our S1. But because our financial information was publicly available now, that had many of the large players in the industry, like Avnet, take a look at us. And ultimately, that's who we sold to in the end of 2004, beginning of 2005.
So I just want to point out you were with, as you described, KPMG 7 years. And until Memic is sold, you were there 9 years. So you made this quite a sizable investment. Again, you entered the CFO office there as well. And I guess it ends with this transaction. Seems like a pretty sizable exit for everybody.
Yeah, it was. Given what we went through in the dot-com crash, to be able to have the market turn around a bit for us, be able to put together a great deal for both, making sure the lenders were whole, the PE company made a return, and the employees did well as well. So it was positive for all constituents.
And what also, Doug, I think distinguishes your path. Again, it's so simple. It seems like the way it's supposed to be done. You work in public accounting. You move to a client. The client, of course, thinks you're smashing and gives you promotions into the CFO office. And then you have a CFO resume where Doug moves on and he has a CFO tour of duty of 5 years at his next stop. And then after that, he has another 5-year CFO tour of duty before he arrives at Tealium, where he's now been 9 years. Now, I'm sure it's not that tidy and short, but you want to clarify for me? How did I do?
Yeah, I think there was an extra 5 years in there, but it's certainly close. And you're right, and that's been an important part of my career. Is I see the value in staying with companies for long periods of time and not jumping ship for a shiny new object, the opportunity to maybe make a little more money. I'm invested. I'm loyal. I like to be part of management teams that know how to work together. We've worked together for many years, and oftentimes there's changes throughout that. But for the most part, working with those management teams, working through challenges of the business, executing on a long-term strategy, to me, that's what's very rewarding and why I've stayed at companies so long. So I agree with that point that you're making. But I did, after we sold that, I did get the great opportunity to join 2 public companies and be on their board of directors. And what I found from that, which then helped me in my next role, was really seeing at the public company level the diversity of the backgrounds and the experiences and the insights that those board members have, and the discussions that were going on in board meetings and in committee meetings. So all that really helped me for my next role, which was the CFO of Limelight Networks, which was a public company. And in fact, I was on the board of Limelight. I stepped down from the board to take over as the CFO. But that experience of having the public company board experience and then moving down to the CFO level, but how that interaction really worked between the CFO, the rest of the management team, and the board. And I'm not talking about just the traditional stuff that you would think about, the finances and the audit committee work, but just the overall strategy and the interaction, and how the board was obviously looking out for the shareholders, but really working well with management and the management team and strategy and go to market.
That's an interesting. You were a board member, and you were invited to step into the CFO role. I know it happens fairly frequently, but can you enlighten us? Is that something where did you throw your hat in the ring, or did you were approached by the management and other board members?
So yeah, there was a little bit of common connection. The other public board that I was on was a company called Website Story, and they were the first real-time web analytics company that started in the early 2000s and went public. I think it was in 2003, and then merged it with a company called Omniture. And then a couple years later, we ended up selling that to Adobe, and it's now the big Adobe Analytics suite. But what happened was the CEO of Website Story ended up going to take Limelight Networks public, and he asked me if I wanted to join that board as well, which I did. So while I was on that board, I wasn't in an operating role at the time. It was after we had sold Memic. I had young kids, and I decided that I would spend some time at home because the last several years, or actually that entire Memic experience, it was really a grind. I worked along with my team, and most of the teams worked really long hours. We were growing so fast, and then we went through the challenging times, et cetera. But there was a challenge between how the accounting and finance team was interacting with the auditors. And we had discussions with the CFO. And then the next quarter, when we met with the audit committee, they said, unfortunately, things aren't getting better. In fact, they're getting worse. So that's when the board decided it was time to do a search for a new CFO, which Jeff Lunsford, who I'll talk about a little bit later, but he's the CFO of Tealium, where I'm working now. So he and I have been together in whether it's board roles together or CEO and CFO working together for nearly 20 years now. But he told me, hey, you're on the beach. You've been on the beach long enough. It's time for you to get back into an operating role. So why don't we throw your name in the hat as the search firm narrows it down to one or two people, then we'll put you into the mix. And I ended up coming out who they chose. So that's how it ended up being board level and then stepping down.
You seem to have been inducted into the boardroom fairly swiftly after your first CFO tour of duty. I mean, you had a comfort level there, I'm going to guess, or you spoke the right language. No, seriously, did you feel comfortable sitting on the board fairly quickly? You knew you.
Yeah, and I would say some of what helped me get comfortable was I was on the board of Memic, and because we're preparing to go public, we ran our quarterly board meetings, and we had audit committee meetings, comp committee meetings. So we were running the company as though we were public in preparation for going public. So at that time we had a good diverse board, but it was different because we were owned by private equity. So there was a pretty loud voice in the room, or large voice in the room, in terms of some of the strategic direction. But I think that experience gave me comfort when I was first asked to join a public board. But I didn't know anyone other than during my rounds of interviews with board members before they selected me to join. So I was, definitely a little intimidated or a little nervous in the first couple board meetings. But for me, I think the way I found my footing was doing what I like to do, which is read financial statements. And when I was reading the first draft of the first 10Q, I believe I had some insightful thoughts, questions, comments, way to change some language. And I think the board respected that, and I know the CFO did as well. And so I think just from being able and feeling comfortable to bring those comments to the table made me feel comfortable, around those other board members, that most of them had a lot more experience and different experiences than I had had.
I just want to have you look back a little bit, just to your KPMG years again. I think I understood your point, which was you stayed a little longer where others might have left earlier, but they got more junior positions. You stayed, and I would imagine you might have been also a little more selective as to the type of opportunity you might have hoped to land. I don't know, but you thought it was worth the investment of sticking around a little longer and seeing what you could land. From what unfolded, it looks like it worked nicely. Am I right? Or
No, you're definitely right. I mean, jumping in at the level that I did, there's certainly things that I never had to do in my career on the accounting side within industry, that people that progress up through industry that have done. I'll give you an example. I'm looking out my office window to our senior staff accountant's desk. If I needed to post a journal entry, I'd have no idea how to do it. Right. So there's things like that I don't know. And, at this point, I don't need to know. But the point really is that I definitely saw, as that partner mentioned to me, just watch. He's seen it. Watch over the next couple of years. And, public accounting is hard. You're grinding it out 80 to 100 hours or more for several years. But to me, it was worth it. It was worth it because of the breadth of companies you got to see, the different industries, the way, whether it's the strategic aspects of the company, the way finance teams are structured and built. I got to see a lot over those 7-year periods. And then I was also, approached by several clients over the years. And the one I selected when I did select Mimic was, I thought the company's prospects were really good. I thought where they were in the market was excellent. They were differentiated from Avnet that you mentioned and Arrow, which were the two giant firms in the industry. So I liked the market positioning. I really liked the team, but I also felt there was great career opportunity there, which, as it happened, I was able to progress pretty quickly from the corporate controller to the America's CFO to ultimately to the global CFO. And I really attribute a lot of that to the fact that I got that advice early in my career, and I ended up staying longer than I had initially thought I would.
Now, usually here, I might ask if there was a recruiter involved in your latest CFO tour of duty, but you've already revealed that you knew the CEO of Tealium, or you already have a relationship back in time. So I would imagine that chapter unfolded through that relationship and most likely didn't involve a recruiter or what have you.
Yeah. My story of coming to Tealium is a little bit unique as well, based on partly what you mentioned. So the CEO at Tealium was the CEO at Limelight, where we were together there. But the company that I had mentioned, Website Story, after that was sold, two of the engineers from Website Story started Tealium. And they, as I had said, they came out of the web analytics business. And what they were doing, they started a consulting company that was helping customers that were struggling with the deployment of the web analytics tool and how they're getting value out of it. So they approached Jeff, our CEO, and asked him for an angel investment. And he said, I'll invest and I'm going to give you money, but I don't invest in consulting businesses. I invest in software businesses. And said, what you guys are doing, you can build this repeatable and you can build it in software. So here's some initial money. go hire these 5 engineers that used to work for us, and then we'll do a larger angel round in 6 or 9 months. So that's when I joined initially, which this is back in 2011. I was part of that angel round. So my view on Tealium was a little bit different because I knew them from the very beginning. And for those couple of years between when I invested and in 2014, when I joined as the CFO, I really got to see what was going on in the company, how the development was going, and the growth of the business.
Well, that's a great segue then for us to find out more about Tealium. If you wouldn't mind, tell us who this company is today. I mean, it's lived several lives since you arrived in
2014.
2014. Tell us about it. What does it do? What are the offerings exactly today?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, Tealium's a software company. We're software as a service. And what we believe, and I think we really are, is the most trusted customer data platform in the industry. And what that is we connect customer data in real time at global scale, and we're connecting across web, mobile, offline. So you have online and offline for the benefit of our customers so they can better connect with their customers. So what all that means is our software helps break down the silos that exist within enterprises. So within digital marketing or the overall marketing, you may have a web team, you may have a mobile team, you have your analytics team, and all of those have different pieces of data about the customer because they're pulling data out of different systems, different software systems. What we do is we clean all that up, and we are the layer then below all the software that we call Upstack that is having those customer interactions. We pull all that data out into one central place that we call the data layer. And from there, we're able to federate that across all those different functional areas within a company. And it doesn't have to be just in marketing. And so now everyone has the same set of data. They may use it different, but it's a complete and its whole set of data that really, really improves the customer experience, the end consumer experience as they're working with our customer. So one thing I would say that maybe would resonate is most of us have all heard over the last few years about digital transformations. And Tealium is a key enabling part of a digital transformation. And in that, for us, it's because we've pre-built over 1,300 turnkey integrations to connect those different applications in a very easy way to the customer. And they're able to do that themselves. So a business person can do this. They don't need a detailed technical knowledge of having to go to IT or engineering to be able to do this connection because they need a piece of data that's in a software package that they don't have access to or can't easily get because they can't write code to get it. So maybe what I can do is to bring all that together and say, okay, give me an example. And so I'll give an example of a simple thing that I think we all run into that Tealium helps. And that's what we refer to as ad suppression. So what happens is, say I need to buy a new pair of pants. So I go on my favorite retailer's website. I find the pants I want. I put them in the cart. But then as usual, my ADD kicks in and I get distracted. I never buy. But throughout the rest of the afternoon and maybe the next day, I'm getting display ads. I'm getting emails. Hey, come back. You left something in your shopping cart. So all those things are great. They're doing a good job of trying to convert me. But then say the day later, I'm on my way home and I decide to stop by the mall and I go into the store because I want to try on those pants and make sure they're the right size and they fit because I need them in a few days. So I go in there and I buy, and so it's great. I had a good experience in the store, but now when I go home or on my phone, I'm still seeing those same ads because the digital side of the company is not connected to the physical side. So the online and offline are not connected. So now me as the consumer, I'm still getting ads for something that I bought. So it's annoying to me. So I'm not having a great end consumer experience. And for the company, they're wasting ad dollars trying to convert somebody that already converted. So that's kind of the big picture of what Tealium does, and a simple example for you of how it works.
Thanks for that. And I know you talked about some of the early angel investing, but can you maybe bring us up to date as far as the capital structure? Was there additional rounds that followed over the period of time you've been there?
Yeah, there's been several. So we did the angel round in 2011. We did our first venture capital round in 2012, and then it was after that, probably every 18 months or 2 years, as we were in the big growth mode and development mode, of doing new rounds. And our most recent round was February of 2021, which was our Series G. And so that put us in the place where we are now based on the scale of the business. We just got to the point where we're free cash flow positive. We have plenty of money in the bank. And at this point, we don't need to raise capital. So we're just focused on internal operations, operational efficiency, and driving growth without the need for capital.
I mean, is this is the path before you to land, head towards an IPO, or what is the most likely path for this company?
Yeah, that's what I see. And one of the reasons I say that is it's important for us, what we call is to be a neutral player. And by that, I mean, those 1,300 connections that I mentioned, we're connecting with people that do the interaction that sit above us. We're connecting with the data warehouses that sit below us. And we want to be friendly with all of them. We don't want to be competitive. There tends to be some overlap between us and some others. But really what we do is staying clearly at that data layer, bringing the data together, making it ready for customers to then act on that in real time is really important to us. So we think that neutrality is important, and the way to maintain that neutrality, I believe, is through an IPO. You could go the PE sponsor route too, to give some liquidity to people because, as I said, people have been in the cap table on the VC side since 2012. But I do see the IPO path, and we're preparing for that before this, the current macroeconomic environment, the change in how software companies are valued and what investors want to see. Instead of growth at all costs, they want that balance, growth and operational efficiency, driving free cash flow and positive earnings, but still rewarding for growth, and they reward more for growth. But you needed to get to profitability, and that's the place where we're at today, and we'll continue to leverage that from here. So yeah, I do think IPO is the likely path, but it could be something else as well.
Curious about your lines of sight into the business, knowing that you've had, 4 CFO chapters. The latest one's a long one, and it really goes back to the whole sort of digital data era. I mean, I think finance leaders really haven't gotten sophisticated with data you could argue since 2015 forward, we've been having these conversations of everybody trying to get real-time data and be able to understand their business up to the very minute. What about you? Have you gotten much more sophisticated in terms of what you're paying attention to and what you're measuring? If we were to look back at Memic, you weren't looking at some of these same metrics, perhaps, that you have available to you today.
Yeah, no, it's definitely different because you have access to so much more data in real time, just like what Tealium provides to our customers, giving you all that information in real time to be able to act on it in real time, like the example I gave. But for me, yeah, I see that one of the things, because of the availability of data, a big project that we're undertaking here is what we call success metrics. And what this means is our CEO wants the ability both for him to look at every person, every individual contributor, every manager, every leader, and be able to see for their role, what are their key performance indicators? How are we measuring that? How are we tracking that over time? And how are those metrics doing? And so this is a big project because we didn't have that information before, but now we have it. It comes from various systems based on the different function where people work. But it's a great benefit, not just so the CEO can see that, it's so the individual contributor can say, hey, look, here's my KPIs. I understand how my KPIs roll up to my department level KPIs. And my leader of my department can show me how those roll up into the functional area, which then roll up into the corporate and strategic goals. So you get that great connection from individual contributors to managers, leaders, and ultimately, where all of us in the senior leadership team can see how we're doing.
Are those success metrics, are OKRs in the mix? Like, how do these individuals know what their goals are and what have you?
Yeah, there's different aspects to the way we have it. Their individual personal goals are different than the success metrics, but it can be OKRs. And it's really identifying for each role, what are the things that should be measured specifically for that role, understanding how I'm doing relative to somebody that does the same thing. What is the output of that job and how can we measure that? And that gets back to your point of, do you have systems and data available? And we do, and it's not real easy going through role by role and defining what each of those KPIs are. And since this is our first go around at it here at Tealium, I think they may change over time, which is like any metric. It may be useful at a time, but then it loses its value and there's something else that you want to track and measure that's more important. So I think the same thing could happen for the individual contributors, as well as throughout the ranks of our employees. But what I also like about this project that I find really helpful for us, especially as we're thinking about operational efficiency and capital allocation, is it gives us a look at the capacity of an individual and a department. So are they under capacity or are they over capacity? And in the past, a lot of times our capital allocation was based on who's loudest. The squeaky wheel is going to get the head count, but it wasn't objective data. We would review things and say, yeah, we see what you're saying and it makes sense, so we're going to give you a couple more heads. But this really gives us that objective data where we can sit down and say, this is what this department needs and why they need it. This department looks like it's over capacity, so I can get some resources from here to either move over or help fund resources that I need somewhere else and balance things out. The other great benefit of when you have this view and this information at your fingertips is you can really see how, because part of being able to do the KPIs, you have to have very clear definitions of what the role is and what it's doing. And as companies grow, the specialization of what happens within the role. So, in 2014, when I got here, I had people that did fairly broad roles within the finance department. But as we got bigger, that role needed to narrow. Instead of somebody working on billings and collections, now it's somebody working on billings, somebody else working on collections. So they become more focused. But with our success metrics, what we're able to see is where there's role overlap, and it may be in different departments, but we're seeing where it kind of looks like they're doing the same thing. Do we have lack of clarity between those departments on roles and responsibilities? And oftentimes that lack of clarity leads to disagreements on who's doing what, double work, inefficiencies, more internal meetings, less customer facing time. So this has been a good benefit already, even though we're still in finalizing the first go around of this whole project. But we've already seen that and have really been able to drive efficiencies out and clarify roles and responsibilities. And it's been really good for the employees. It's like, okay, now I understand what they're doing. It's not gray anymore. So it's been very valuable.
I wanted to ask you about your FP&A team. Is the FP&A team playing a key role in helping put this in place?
Actually, my FP&A team in this success metrics is not involved as much in this. We're using what we have, and this is something that I learned also early on in my career that I did, and it's been really valuable, which was embedding a financial analyst or an analyst within the functional area. So rather than having FP&A be a large centralized group, I like FP&A more focused on corporate finance rather than the business related finance. So what we have, like in our R&D team, we brought in a really, really, really smart young guy that, to me, the number one quality of him, he is endlessly curious. He wants to know everything that he can. We run our Tealium platform on AWS. And what he really wants to do, because he knows the importance of gross margins and cost of goods sold, what he really wants to do is understand the technology to the extent he can, to work with engineers and say, hey, you're building this product, but the resources that it's going to use is going to be really expensive, and it's going to be hard to get the gross margins that we want out of the product. So if we use some of these other components and we design the software on those components versus the direction we're going to be much better. Ultimately, it's going to be more efficient use of our platform as well as better gross margins. So the way I like to see it is having that financial type person. When I say embedded, meaning they work for that functional team. So they're either dotted line to my FP&A team or just straight within that function, but work very well in sharing information with the corporate FP&A function.
Okay. Well, we want to jump to our finance strategic moment question, where we ask you to look back in time and just share with us a moment of strategic insight that you experienced sometime along the way. It might have been last week. It might have been 10 years ago. What comes to mind when we ask for a finance strategic moment?
It's funny because you had just brought up FP&A, and for me, it really revolves around FP&A. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that I did spend 7 years in public accounting, and most of my interactions with the companies that I was auditing was with the accounting side of the finance team, not the FP&A side. I interacted with CEOs, HR, operations at different points in the audit, but really FP&A was not part of it. And I had some finance classes in college, but I never really understood how valuable that FP&A team could be until I left public accounting and went to MEMIC that had a small FP&A team. And what that team was initially doing that I saw as a challenge was they were being more finance police. They were attending functional area QBRs and just dinging them on missing performance or asking a lot of questions about information that they didn't have because the FP&A team hadn't shared it with them yet. So I flipped that around and said, what we need to be doing is having the FP&A team be a partner rather than an antagonist in really helping these teams. And so instead of going to the meeting and asking questions, going to the meeting and having already provided data to that team so that way we could have more meaningful conversations about the whys of the performance and not the what's and just looking at numbers. So I really saw that value, which because of that and the importance that these operational teams saw in FP&A, instead of them having meetings and not inviting somebody from finance, they would move their meetings around because they wanted finance involved because of the value of what they were providing. And back to our conversation on where I said the embedded FP&A, that's really where I got that concept from, was when I saw that value, that's when I wanted to start putting more finance people within the functional area closer to that part of the business. And that was really, I would say, one of the most strategic moments, especially early on in my career.
From episode 938, this is 1 Minute with Jason Leet, CFO of Xylo.
The other thing that we as a company are getting better on, because it matters, is just understanding our customer mix as far as segment, correlating that to, at least at a higher level, given our stage of the company today, what are the unit economics of those different segments, and do we like those or not? What's the retention rate look like by segment? What's the software versus services mix look like? Just all those kind of criteria, because that will help you based on what you are today, who you are today, your product functionality, help you guide you to what's the optimal place to focus your investments today.
We're going to jump to our mentoring round where we'll ask you several quick questions intended to inform and inspire future finance leaders. We'd like to know about that first 30 days in the role of CFO. It was back at Mimic. You had a lot of responsibility already. There were transactions that were not too far away, I suppose. But, what would you go back in time and tell yourself? What is that piece of advice you wish someone had given you when you first stepped into the role for the first time?
Yeah, it's a great question. And what comes to mind is at Mimic, the chairman from the private equity company, he and I would meet usually every couple of weeks, whether it was by phone because he was based in the UK or he was in San Diego a lot. But we would talk about the business, and he was also kind of a mentor, as he knew I was new in my CFO role. But one of the things he said is a very important thing when you become into leadership. Part of our role is implementing the strategic objectives of the company and kind of your big rocks throughout the year. But every day there's going to be fires and issues. That's part of our role as leaders, is to be helping our teams manage challenging issues or problems. And he said, solve this with the acronym SUG. Is it serious? Is it urgent? And is it growing? And when you look at it from that lens and you feel overwhelmed because there's so much going on, it really helps you take a step back and say, okay, I have all these issues. I have a couple that seem urgent to the person that thinks it's a problem, but it's not really serious and the problem's not growing, so I could park that for a while. And so really viewing it through that lens has been very helpful to me to really take a step back. What am I looking at for my day? How do I plan my day? How do I plan my time? So it was great. This was probably the first conversation we had 2 years into my CFO role. So I did get that advice fairly early on. I wish I had that advice from day one at KPMG as well.
We always like to ask our guests to reflect a little on the personal side for us. Would you share something with us about yourself that most people might not know?
Yeah, I would say most people don't know just because of my personality. They may not think it's something that I do, but I started doing guided meditation about 2 years ago. And I do that every morning shortly after I wake up. I used to go to the gym early to get my day rolling. But I've found this for me, it really puts me in a good place, being mindful, starting out my day. It's been really helpful and valuable to me, to just, as things are hectic, it just puts you in a mindful presence, and it's been valuable.
Excellent. Great. Thank you for that. I have to tell you, since COVID, we've had more finance leaders tell us they're meditating than all the episodes before COVID. I'm not sure why that might be, but maybe it's obvious.
Yeah.
At the same time, we always like to ask for a book recommendation. Doesn't have to be a business book. Might be something you escape with or something that's just influenced you in some way. Anything come to mind?
Yeah, and it's probably more the latter, a non-business book, but I think there's business value that comes out of it. It's a book called Hardwiring Happiness by Rick Hansen, he's a neuropsychologist. And what this book is about is it's talking about how our brains, because of how we've evolved over the last couple thousand years from fight or flight survival to where we are today, our brains naturally focus on negative experiences versus positive. And what the book does, it gives you techniques. One of them's called Taking in the Good, which is really just taking a few moments every day to reflect on what happened positive throughout the day. Did somebody give you a compliment on what you accomplished at work, or whatever happened that's positive throughout your day? Focus on that and put the negatives aside. Look at your backyard, whatever your view may be, and just be thankful about that you have that view and how lucky we are, and really start focusing on positive rather than negative. And it's been really good and helpful for me, and it's helped me change a little bit of how I am as a leader, and really trying to focus on the positive things that people are doing and not dwell on negatives. There's a time and place for that, but creating a much more positive environment is really, really beneficial to everyone.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for that. And we are up to our final question. Well, I'll ask you to look forward finally for the next 12 months. What are your priorities as CFO of Tealium?
Yeah, I think I gave you a picture about where we are and a bit where we're headed. But in the next 12 months, it's really to focus on those operational efficiencies and continue on our success metrics project, because I think we're going to see a lot of value and efficiencies come from that, and will give us the ability to reallocate resources to other areas that may be driving more growth or enabling us to create more product. So wherever that ends up taking us, either way, we're going to be in a better position, and I think we'll be able to continue our growth. Our growth rate will probably go up, and we'll be able to do it more efficiently. So I think that's one thing. The other thing that you've probably heard many CFOs talk about in this world, even a company like Tealium today, and I view us still as a relatively small company, but we use almost 100 different software packages across the organization. And there is a lot of overlap. We have different departments using different ticketing systems. And so there's different reasons why they chose them, but there's inefficiencies there because there's certain people that need to see both ticketing systems. So there's stuff like that. I think we need to do a much better job when things come up for renewal, looking at our utilization rates, looking at the ROI that we thought we were going to get out of the tool. Do we have something else that has overlapping functionality and we can get rid of one? So to me, that's another part. It's already underway for us, but it's going to be a continued focus over the next 12 months.
Doug Lindroth, thank you for joining us on CFO Thought Leader.
Thank you.
Hello, Thought Leader listeners. As you have perhaps already heard or even seen, we're now featuring the career lessons and moments of strategic insight shared by our CFO guests as Thought Leader videos. You can now find these videos on our blog at cfothoughtleader.com and, of course, our newsletters, but also on LinkedIn. If you haven't already, please go ahead and follow our CFO Thought Leader LinkedIn company page, and you'll be certain not to miss a single Thought Leader video debut. CFO Thought Leader, the #1 thought leadership platform exclusively for and by CFOs. As always, thank you for listening.